Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with the chairman and co-founder of multiple tech startups, a best-selling author of The End of Jobs, The Rise of On-Demand Workers and Agile Corporations. He's an investor and keynote speaker, Jeff Wald. Thank you for being on the show, man. I was telling you before, man, I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show that's so well-rounded. Everything from tech startup multiple times, successful exits, producer of music videos and TV films, volunteer or auxiliary police department. You've done a spectrum of things, and I'm excited to learn from you today.
I am super, super glad to be here. And I will tell you, you get one turn in this world. So go out there and live your life.
Tell us about you, man.
I will say this about my childhood that I was unbelievably fortunate to grow up in my family with the support that I had. And I recognize that every day. I get on my knees every night and I pray and I just say thank you for everything I've been given. And I recognize that if I had not been given that start, I may not be where I am today. But I'll also say this about my childhood. I was not an entrepreneurial child. I wasn't like, oh, I want to go start a lemonade stand or a snow shoveling business or things like that. I did take my first job at JP Morgan as an M&A banker. I mean, that is as formal and as old school as it gets. I worked 120 hours a week, slept at my desk, and I loved it. I thought it was the best job in the world. And I thought that's what my career would be, just kind of corporate America, marching along, climbing that ladder. And it wasn't until later that I kind of got this entrepreneurial spirit and began starting companies. And I will always say, like, I'm not a real entrepreneur. Like, I'm not the guy that's just like, hey, I got to take every risk and burn the boats and go like this. I am still that M&A banker. I still have models and I create spreadsheets and I'm very analytical. And in a lot of ways that handicaps me as an entrepreneur. But my roots were not in where I evolved, except for my family and the support system that I have. New York's come a long way, but that first startup I did in 2006, there was a very, very small ecosystem. And one of the many things I take a lot of pride in is helping to grow that ecosystem in New York City and getting the founders together and talking about our failure and making sure people knew they weren't alone with those companies. Because again, most of these fail. And when you face that kind of failure, that huge business public failure, you lose your money, your investors' money. It sucks, man. I've been there. It really sucks. And you need to know that you're not alone, as we all need to know in a lot of ways. But
There's,
that ecosystem did not really exist in New York City in 2005, 2006.
how do you know when it's time to start having those conversations?
Oh, Ron, you're a good guesser and you're a great interviewer because you are 100% correct. You're leading me right where where the conversation should go, which is I have a list, man. The day I start a company, I have a list of who are the potential buyers. Look, I'm not doing that for any reason other than it's super important to always keep one of the thousand eyes you have to have on things. You got to keep one eye on that endpoint. And you should keep it on there for a host of reasons. It's important to understand, let's say for the last big exit we had, this company, WorkMarket. WorkMarket was enterprise software that enabled companies to organize, manage, and pay their on-demand workers. So staffing firms were a potential exit point for us. The HR software companies were a potential exit point for us. I didn't think about ADP as a potential exit point for us, even though that is eventually who bought us, which goes to show the lists are kind of dumb because my eventual buyer wasn't even on my list. But it was important for me that when the head of corp dev at Workday came to town, head of corp dev at SAP or SuccessFactors, their HR platform, or Oracle, I need to see them. I need to talk to them. I need to stay on their radar for when they're ready to buy, but I need to understand what they're thinking about. I need to read all the news about what's going on in that sector. If no one in my sector ever got bought, why do I think I'm going to be the first? I mean, they have burned through so much cash. It is incredible. But to your point, it is somewhat unique in the tech industry that you can build a piece of technology and sell it for a lot of money, even though it's not profitable. The notion being that the margins are so high that at scale, it's very difficult to not be profitable. And I think the most famous example of that was Salesforce, where for a long time, or Amazon, quite frankly, for a long time,
Amazon.
they weren't profitable. And they said, look, we're just building because when we get to this scale, we're going to be throwing off a huge amount of cash. And that is what happened with both of those companies. And so that certainly is a possibility and could have happened with WorkMarkets and Scenero and Spinback and the companies I exited. It's just From our standpoint, we want to build as much tech as quickly as possible and grow revenue as quickly as possible and then exit. But here's what's happening in the tech world, which I think is an underreported story, is that big tech companies and big companies, and ADP, I think, should be viewed as a tech company. I'm going to pick on them for a little bit here. But 5 years ago, they really weren't a tech company. They were a service company that had some
Mhm.
technology. Now I would say they're a technology company that has some services. ADP 5 years ago, when they bought Work Market, again, they spent well over $100 million for Work Market. They could not have built that platform themselves. They just didn't have the teams, they didn't have the capacity, just couldn't do it. Now they could. So the proliferation of tech skills, the proliferation of open source software, the proliferation of low code, no code platforms to build different technology products have so massively lowered the cost to build. Because again, what is our friend that runs M&A and Corp Strat at ADP thinking? He's thinking buy versus build.
Should they expect? What should they do? And then we'll talk about the day after in a minute.
So I think you have to be, and this was, as you alluded to in our pre-show conversation, you have to be comfortable with what you get day one. And the notion of whether it's a contingent payment or your equity in the continuing business, I literally at this point tell friends, and not that I've gotten burned by this yet, there's still some contingent payments out there. If you are not happy with what you get in your pocket day one, don't do the deal. Do not count on, because your point of maximum leverage is the moment before you sign that document. Once you sign it, that's it, right? Like you are now just an employee. You may be a shareholder, you might have a senior title, but the number of times that we've seen friends kind of have suboptimal outcomes when they were counting on what was going to happen day two, 2 years from now, 1 year, whatever it was, you don't have control over those outcomes. And I'm not saying that people are there trying to screw each other. They're not. And obviously, there are legal agreements and this and that. But you have limited control. And if your ultimate control is, well, I'll sue them if they don't pay, that might be their business model, by the way. Look, I will tell you the bigger sting in the hat changing is putting on the work hat again. I've been in this role as chairman of 6 different companies that I've helped co found over the last 2 years. I am gearing up right now to do another HR tech startup where I will be the CEO again. And so I won't pretend that I'm not afraid about it. Being the chairman where other people are running it, if it fails, I'd be like, well, they were the ones doing it. I came up with the idea and helped fund it, but they took it, and if it worked, great, whatever. When I take the reins again, it's on me. Like, that's not fair to my other team members and all the advisors and other people that are there to help. But at the end of the day, it's on the founder and the CEO. And so I have anxiety about that, or anxiety is not the right word, fear. I have some fear about that. And I have some fear about getting back in the saddle and going that hard. And the fear is not, hey, I'm going to work 18 hours a day again. That's not the fear. I'm not afraid of that. My fear is that I'll work 18 hours a day again, even though I know I don't need to. And my life is different now. I'm
Mhm.
getting married. Like, we're going to have a family. And I don't want to lose myself in work, which is what I did before. And so putting that hat back on to get back in to build another company to sell it, clearly the goal, knowing that my life is different and knowing my tendency to kind of go all in, there's fear there as well. And I've had a lot of conversations with my future wife about this, that I need to be mindful that my life is different and I can't just say, whatever, I'll work until 3 in the morning and just get it done every day. I can do that every now and again, but
Right.
I have other obligations that I need to be mindful of.